Hi everyone, my name is Alex. I'm the CEO at SignOnSite, and I would just like to welcome Chris Hadrell, who is our guest here today. We're going to be talking all about ISO implementation and basically how to smash it, how to nail your ISO implementation. So we're trying to be very practical with our webinars that we do with Chris, because he is such a wealth of knowledge on the topic, and we had so many responses after our ISO certification webinar last time that we wanted to do another session with Chris just on how you can be successful, common pitfalls, all that sort of thing. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to our audience.
Hi, thank you, Alice. Chris Hadrell is my name. My business is Risk and Safety Solutions. We work with small to medium and large enterprise businesses, getting them ISO certification from 45,001 for safety, 9,001 for quality, and 14,001 for environment. So what they call tri-certification process.
Sorry, I'm muted. How many times am I going to say that in this webinar? Quite a few, I think.
Hopefully not too many.
So we will have people dropping in and out of the webinar over the sort of 45-ish to an hour that it should take. If you miss anything, there will be a recording of the webinar, and the SignOnSite team will send you out a handy checklist at the end of it with all of Chris's top tips that you could be doing. So I'm just going to chuck a poll in the poll section where you can tell us when you're thinking of starting the ISO certification process. So the other option is, if you have any questions that you would like to ask during the webinar, you can ask them anonymously if you would like. You just go to the activities section. So it's the second furthest button on the right hand side under activities. You'll want to go Q&A. And then you can just ask a question in there, and Chris and I will ask it at the end. So Charlotte from our marketing team will also be adding all of Chris's details into the chat function so that you can contact him. You can find him and his team on LinkedIn. Ask him as many questions as you like privately outside of this if you don't want to ask it publicly. But really, there's no dumb questions. And if you're thinking about a question, honestly, probably half the audience is as well, so they'll be grateful for somebody sticking their hand up and asking. So look, we've got quite a bit to cover today, Chris, and people don't really want to hear my voice. They're here for your dulcet tones. So
thank you.
Could you sort of take us through it? Let's do a little intro to ISO. I'm sure everybody knows what it is, but just like as a consultant, what's the strategy that you would do for an ISO certification process?
Well, yeah, ISO, International Standards Organization, is what it stands for. It's a member countries. I think there's 70 or 80 member countries now that are part of the ISO family. And basically, it's a management system certification that enables a business to unlock government contracts in some ways. A lot of people get ISO certified because it becomes a requirement when they're tendering on big construction jobs or on other government projects. But most importantly, it's a system where you actually have a decent management system to run your business that makes it more profitable, safer, more efficient, and basically you're providing the tools to make your business run as an efficient way, and you're engaging your people as part of that process. So it's a bit of a journey that you take people on.
So can you talk us through the most common I suppose certifications that people receive in the construction industry, because obviously there's hundreds of things that you can be certified on from ISO as a standard.
Exactly. So the most common one is ISO 45001, which is your OH&S standard. That's what 90% of people go for. It's a way of proving that your system is it's a way of proving that your system actually meets the minimum standards and meets the criteria. And basically the next one that people would, most common one is quality, the 9001, and that's an assurance particularly for those who are building residential buildings, that the client has a level of security that they're getting a quality project that's going to be compliant, and you've got systems and records to prove that your quality is right. Things like waterproofing structure, fire systems, you've got the certificates and everything to make sure that, and they're easily accessible if anyone needs to find them down the track. So, yeah.
Fantastic. You might have noticed as well, ISO coming up a lot more in your subcontractor requirements for people that are doing government work. So as a supplier, we have to be ISO 27001 accredited ourselves, which is information security. So there's so many different things that we can be doing, but we'll be focusing specifically on the construction-based ones, which you can talk about with Chris, I suppose, from a lot of experience. So Chris, why is it important, we talked about this a lot last time, to give yourself time and be deliberate in your approach to an ISO rollout?
Yeah, it's very important to get it right, and it's like anything that you're going to change in your business, it has to be led from the top. So if the owners and the leadership team are not part of it and they think that they can delegate this process to the safety person or the quality person or somebody down the chain, it definitely will fall over, because unless the leadership understand why they're doing it and understand the benefits of doing it, then it's going to be something that people will just tick a box. They'll put the system in the drawer, and then 6 months later, when you go to get accredited, nothing's going to be implemented, and you're not getting any benefit of going through the process. So that's one of the key things of 100% making sure that the owners and the leadership team are 100% on board, 100% engaged, and making sure that, even from a safety point of view, regardless, if the owners of the business and the leadership team are showing interest in the people that work for them, then they will get a far more productive and happier workforce.
You made such a good point there, which is not putting it in a drawer. And I think something that people forget about is that you can have all of these processes and policies and procedures, but if you're not able to show your auditor evidence of your company following through on those things, actioning those procedures, they're not going to believe you, and you're going to end up with massive non-conformances. Have you seen this happen before?
Yes, unfortunately we have, where people think that they've got the system, literally park it, they don't do anything with it, don't do the inspections, they don't do the checks that they're supposed to be doing, they're not doing their ITPs from a quality point of view. So yeah, when we come around to get them externally accredited or certified, then it's just a nightmare, and it becomes such a hassle for that business then to go and fix all those non-conformances, whereas if they just did it right the first time, they would be fine. And the whole point is it's a system that you're going to get benefit. It's a system, if you've got a good management system, then you have a good business.
That's such a good point, is not creating a management system that is so far removed from what you do day to day, when the whole goal of this is to make you better at safety, to produce better quality work. It's about improving your actual business and creating specific processes that achieve that goal, rather than creating a specific process that ticks a box.
Yes, 100%. And it's not just about if you don't use the system and to improve your business, the whole thing is to make these systems simple, easy to use. They reflect exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis. You don't have to put in extra things that you don't need. There is obviously some compliance things and legal things you have to do, and that's, you've got to do them whether you're ISO accredited or not. So all this does is just give you a nice, simple framework to pull it all together and make it work.
That's great. Let's dive into, let's say, year one. We like people to have 6 to 12 months at least for an implementation. What does
look, on average, sorry.
No, you go, tell me.
On average, it takes around about 12 months. That's pretty much our experience, because you basically, it takes time to develop the system to make sure that it reflects what your business actually does. And then once you roll it out, then you have to induct and train everybody on that system. So that's a process where we go through and we do online meetings, or we do face-to-face induction training for people so they understand what the system does. And then we then talk to each level, and as part of the leadership team, of what their responsibilities are, and when they've got to go out to site and do audits, and when they've got to do internal audits, how they manage their quality, where they store their ITPs, what system they're using. If you're using like an online cloud system to manage your documents, it's making sure that that's all set up the correct way. So yeah, so basically the first 3 to 6 months is getting the system developed and customized to your business. And then the next 6 to 9 months is the rollout implementation. So training your team, helping people understand what their role is and how often they have to do checks and how often they have to do inspections, how they sign off on those processes and those ITPs, and the environmental checks as well, making sure that we've got the records of waste trails and recycling and all that sort of stuff from an environmental point of view as well. And then it's the internal audit process where you go in and you verify that people are actually following the system, which is just the whole key to the whole process.
Taking it back to the first sort of 3 months that you mentioned, you talked about customizing the system. And I think that this is something that we should really focus on, because it's the difference between buying an off-the-shelf ISO system and buying an ISO system that I'm going to say you will actually use. And so I've worked at companies that have done it both ways. So we have implemented ISO alongside a consultant, and we've purchased off-the-shelf ISO systems, and I can tell you it's like night and day. Chris, I'm very confident that you've had people come to you who have bought an off-the-shelf ISO system and it really hasn't worked for them. Can you give me some more stories?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, we have, obviously I've got competitors in my space that will sell you a system literally off the shelf. They'll just put your logo on the top and say, here you go. That just doesn't work in our experience. What we've found in those cases is we don't tell them, but after a period of time, they do realize that system they bought off the shelf is essentially useless. And we end up customizing and developing our own system with the client to make sure that it actually works for their business. So basically, we've got to a point now with a lot of our clients who have an existing system that they may have used 5 or 6 years ago and then just stopped using. And they said, oh, can we just modify this system? And generally we're finding that it's not cost effective. By the time we try and fix another system or fix a legacy system that's been around for 5 or 8 years, there's so many changes in legislation and so many differences that have happened in the last 5 years that basically it's simpler, quicker and easier just to throw that system out and go clean slate. And we find that the most efficient. I mean, we've got a client now that's wanting us to do a gap analysis on their system, but the reality is we're going to spend a week doing the gap analysis to basically tell them, throw it out. But we've given them that option up front, so they're still wanting to go down that path. But yeah.
Wow, bold.
Well, yeah. Anyway, I think
because sometimes you're going to let people do it, you know.
Well, I think part of the process is that there's a journey of discovery for them as well. Like they need to. It's surprising how many businesses really don't delve into the detail and understand what their business processes are or should be. They sort of, particularly some older school, shall we say, managers and business owners, think that they're just happy to sit there and watch the numbers go around without actually pulling up their sleeves and being involved in the day-to-day and making sure that people are safe, people are happy, people know what they're meant to do, and they know how to fix things properly, not just band-aid them.
That's a really good point, because we're seeing so much competition in terms of staffing in construction at the moment. We've seen salaries really skyrocket for certain roles. So you want to be, as an employer, providing a really good place for people to work. And ISO is genuinely a way for people to do that. It's a way for people to know that your company cares about safety, that it cares about quality, that it's got processes in place for that.
Yeah, that's a win-win. Exactly right. So in the current climate where we just simply don't have enough people with skills in the industry, it's a very demand-driven industry at the moment. People can't get good people, basically. So if you have a well-developed, well-managed system, ISO accredited system, management system, that will help you attract a higher level of person, because they know they haven't got to go backwards in joining your business. They know that there's a really good base to work from, there's systems to work from, and that we've got a very effective and efficient structure to manage your day-to-day job. Whether you're a safety person or a quality person, project manager, site manager, it's very refreshing when you have a client, when they recruit you, say project manager, and they come in and they can see that you've got a great system to work with, and they can feel confident that they haven't got to reinvent the wheel, they haven't got to go and pull what they used to do at their last job and bring all that across with them, because there's nothing to work with. So it's great to have a simple, understand system that really does the work for you.
Chris, I'm going to give you a scenario, but I thought that it might be fun for us to play out maybe a typical SignOnSite customer and how they might go through an adoption process. So SignOnSite customers, very often commercial builders. They probably do about 20 million turnover a year, and they're likely trying to tender on a government project, which is why they're trying to go for the trifecta accreditation. So I come to you, what's the process? What process do I go through with you? What's our first meeting that we would have, and who would be on that call?
That first meeting would be with the owners of the business or the leadership team, at least one director, if not two directors, whatever the structure is. But definitely one of those two people, the CEO, that level. And then usually there's also the safety quality person is usually part of that, because that's often how we come into a business from that level. And basically we do like a face-to-face, or we do an online meeting like this, and we basically ask a bunch of questions about your business, how you operate, where your locations are, how many offices you have, how many sites you have, what type of system, what sort of systems you're looking for, and again, making sure that we then understand how their actual structures work. So we look at their org chart, look at their structures, and then we customize from their org chart. We then allocate roles and responsibilities to each of those people and those positions. And then when we roll out the system, we can then sit down, and as we train people and induct them on the new system, we say, as a PM, these are the 10 things you need to do. As a site manager, these are the 10 things you need to do. As the CEO, these are the 10 things you need to do. So it becomes very clear what people need to do. And that's the essence of any business. If each person understands their role and understands what their responsibilities are, then all you've got to do as the leadership team is make sure people are held accountable.
Yes, absolutely. And so having leadership on board is such a crucial part of a change management process. If you don't have that executive buy-in, it can be really hard to get something off the line when it's going to take resources and it's going to take time from personnel to implement a process like this. And it's going to take a transition period for people to learn their new processes, the 10 new things that you've given to the site manager, and to do them consistently as well. So what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen in places that don't do executive buy-in?
Exactly what happens in those cases is that normally the rollout takes an extra 6 to 12 months, if not 2 years, because when we go and do an internal audit or we audit on behalf of the client, then we find so many non-conformances and so many issues that then have to be addressed before you can go through the certification process. So yeah, if you don't, and the leadership buy-in is the same, like you said, this is going to take time. It's probably not going to cost a huge amount in actual resources in terms of most people already have some sort of cloud-based system or some sort of SignOnSite, or they have something else that will be a great tool for them to use. But where if you don't have the ownership providing that time for people to actually do it, you basically will still need an internal champion. Is one of the other pitfalls that people don't follow. So if there's not someone within the business that's championing up the change and the rollout, then it will fall over, because it has to have an internal resource where people on a daily, weekly basis is doing that follow-up. Have you done your inspection this week? Have you filed your ITPs for the waterproofing? Have you? All those questions that need to be asked. And we find that in businesses in that range, in that 20 mil range, where they don't have a full-time safety quality environment resource, they usually find by the end of that 6 to 12 months that they need to go and get one.
100%.
Yeah, and as much as we love, as a consultancy, we love to be the external person and provide as much backup as we can, you still need that internal resource to actually make it happen. So, and that's an understanding that the directors have to come to on their own and realise that I can't just give this to a PM as part of his normal job. If he's got 6 projects to manage, he's not going to have time to do this, or she's not going to have time to do this. So it's definitely, there is a resource issue. You have to put enough resources in, at least an internal champion, to make sure that this actually is going to work.
Fantastic. So we've had our first meeting. I've started implementing a few of the custom pieces that we've talked about in terms of processes, procedures. At what point would you be comfortable doing an internal audit, and can you take people through what an internal audit process would be?
So basically, in that 3 to 6 months is where we would probably start to do the first round of internal audits. And there's 2 parts. It's basically, we can do a desktop audit to see if you're filling out the forms, where's the evidence of those forms, where's the inspections being done, have you done the weekly inspection on site, have you done your quarterly and monthly inspections, have you been holding the toolboxes each month as per the plan, have you got your registers up to date for electrical quality, all those things. So there's obviously that searching for the physical evidence that you're actually implementing the system. And then the second part is actually on the ground, walking around the sites with hopefully the leadership, but at least usually the safety person or the quality person that goes with you, and just going through and seeing what is actually being done on site. Are we following the process? Are we working safely? Are we producing good quality product? Do we have the records for all our waterproofing? Do we have all the records for our fire systems? All those sorts of things on a typical commercial building site. Even to the fact of, if we've got a scaffold on site, have we got the scaff tag? Is it up to date? Do we have handover certificates? So it's just all that checking and verification. And that particularly that first 2 to 3 internal audits, because you probably take 2 or 3 before you get it right. It's also a coaching process where we spend an enormous amount of time with the guys on the front line and the girls on the project sites, making sure that they understand what it is they're meant to do, and most importantly, why it's important. And it's obvious to say, because I want to go home safe tonight, and I want to go home, make sure that everyone on my watch goes home safe. But once you actually realise that that's your key responsibility, and it's your due diligence as a manager, leader, supervisor to do those things, once that penny drops, that's when you know you've got a system and a business that's ready.
So they're ready now. They're at the point where they're doing that consistently. What does an external audit process look like? So
external audit bodies, I work with a business called Global Mark. So we will then, through Global Mark, organise an independent auditor, so someone that's not part of my business unit, who will come in and they will spend, probably depending on the size, so if we take our $20 million type business, they'll spend probably 2 to 3 days doing the initial documentation review, which can be face-to-face or it can be done remotely. It can be depending on where the particular business is located. And that's where they go through and will check 2 auditors in some cases, depending on the size of the business and how quickly. Generally, it's just the 1 auditor who will come through, and they'll look at all the system documentation. So they'll spend a couple of days looking at the system documentation and then comparing that to the ISO standards and making sure it meets the minimum criteria from a standards point of view. And then, provided that goes relatively well, which obviously if it's our system it will, then then the key part becomes they'll come back a week or two later, or whatever the appropriate time is to go back and do the second round. So that's stage one is the document review, and stage two is basically the implementation and gathering of evidence. So again, they will come to site, they will walk around, and they will make sure that the inspections are being done, the forms are being filled out, the permits are being done, people are understanding, people have been inducted, people have been trained on the system, all those things, plus all your legal requirement stuff. If people need crane licenses and high-risk work licenses and forklifts, all that stuff, they'll be checking to make sure all that's in place as well. And once you've got all that in place, and they can verify on site that you are actually following the system and you are actually compliant with the essence of the legislation, then they will recommend you for certification.
Fantastic. So it's only really at that point that you can say, yes, we are ISO certified.
Yeah. So then there's once those two auditors do their report, they will send it into their own certification body, Global Mark or SIO Global, or whoever is the certification body. And there's even an internal compliance process there. Those reports get reviewed by usually their compliance team or their compliance officers to make sure that they have gone and addressed every clause of the criteria and every clause of the standard to make sure that, yes, it meets the standard, and yes, we have evidence of implementation and compliance to that standard. And then once that compliance team signs off, then the certificates will get issued by the accreditation body. And then you get them in the mail, or you get them in the email now, and you can frame them up, put them on the wall, put them on your website, and go for it.
That's a big one. You want that. It's like a little shield with the ticks. You want to be putting that on your website. We know everybody does.
Yeah, it is, and there's actually some rules around what you can and can't do with those ticks, for want of a better term. You can't use it to certify your product, because what we're talking about in this case with ISO management systems is we are just certifying the management system. We're not certifying the product. So if you're a manufacturer and you make fire extinguishers, you can't put that logo on those extinguishers. For that, it has to be a whole different accreditation process. So there are some rules, but that's right.
So for those of you that arrived a little late, if you have any questions, you can just pop into the activities button, which is a little triangle square circle in the bottom right-hand side. Go to Q&A. You can ask any questions that you would like. We will get to them at the end as best we can. Otherwise, I'll just make up some questions for you, Chris, if people aren't feeling a bit shy. Awesome. Don't you worry about that. Then we also have a poll going, so we can see that most people are looking to do ISO accreditation either ASAP or in the next 6 to 12 months. So what should they be doing today to ensure that they can be ISO accredited, at the start of 2026, at the end of 2025?
Yeah, well, look, essentially they need to start the process now. Like I said, it's about a 12-month process from when you start to when you get accredited. You can do it faster depending on how much resource you want to throw at it. It's like anything. The more money and the more resources you throw at it, then things will happen faster. But there's still the minimum things of making sure you have a system in place, you engage. Obviously, I'm going to say you're going to engage a consultant to fast track that process. By trying to do it on your own, it's going to take longer. Whereas if you use a consultant like ourselves, then it's faster and easier and more efficient, because we've already done this 50 times before. So we know how to get things done and how to do it properly.
One of the most common questions that we see when we do talk about ISO accreditation is one or two people in the business knowing how crucial this is, knowing that they're not going to be able to tender on projects, or knowing that it could improve the quality of the work that they're doing, but finding it really hard to actually build a business case for ISO. What advice do you have for them on how to put that together?
Yeah, we can help with that sort of stuff, but yeah, essentially it's the cost. It's there's two things. There's the opportunity cost. So in terms of taking the pure quality one, if you want to improve your business and you do it the good old cliche of do it right the first time. If you've got a good quality management system in there where you're checking things the first time, you're doing your waterproofing correctly, you're doing your fire systems correctly and your fire penetrations correctly, and documenting all that, then you don't have to go back during the warranty period and fix defects. And we all know that fixing defects is a very, very expensive process once the building is actually finished or near completion. In fact, I have a client who wasn't ISO certified, and they had so many defects on one particular building that it actually put them out of business.
Wow.
So the cost of not doing it right and the legal implications of going back and fixing multiple defects on multiple locations and multiple floors literally collapsed the business.
Wow. That's
so
scary.
That's a very scary one, and that's literally in the last 18 months that's happened. And you'll see that where some of these businesses, since the building commissioner came along, and it has changed the goalpost somewhat, which has been a great refreshing thing for the industry. It's very important to get the things right the first time. So, and if you take the safety example as well, part of when we roll out our ISO systems is we spend a lot of time doing due diligence training and understanding what that looks like for the leadership team. Because if you do have an injury, an average back injury in Australia costs 100 to 250,000 just in lost time and costs and medical costs. And then if you do have a serious injury, your fines from Safe Worker now for industrial manslaughter is up to $20 million. And 20 years in jail. So that's the extreme case. We've got good systems, good processes, we're able to demonstrate due diligence, then we're going to avoid having to go to jail. We're going to avoid having those people seriously injured, and that's one of the most important things you'll get out of it.
A very good business case strategy for those of you who are based in Australia. I think there's only 2 states now that don't have industrial manslaughter laws.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's a very compelling argument to make sure that if you have a good management system that you're proving, if you're able to demonstrate due diligence with, then that will keep you and your team, including project managers and other people, directors obviously particularly, will keep them literally away from the court system and out of jail, quite literally.
What I think is so interesting in that in particular is that a lot of people feel like because they have the process there on paper that that's good enough. But what we're seeing now is when you're actually showing up to court in these cases, particularly where there's been incident or injury, and they're charging you in an industrial manslaughter case, that you have to have stress tested your system as well. So you can't just say, I have the system in place, I assume it impacts my metrics, or I assume it makes people safer. You actually have to prove that your system is making people safer, it is mitigating risk, as opposed to just, I assume that because I have, done this one particular safety requirement and I've added it to all of my swims, that, that's immediately better for people. And it's like, well, no, if it's not stress tested, if you haven't been able to provide evidence that actually is impactful on this project or at this company or for this type of work, it's just not cutting it in court anymore.
No, 100%. And it's the same in any court case. If it's not written down, it didn't exist. So we often hear owners of businesses saying, oh yeah, I go out and check my sites all the time, because if you are charged by the regulator, and it doesn't matter which state you're in Australia, when you fill out the forms post those incidents, they will send you out saying, how do you, as the owner or as the director, how did you verify your system was effective? How did you verify that the people were following the system? How did you verify that the processes and inspections and the that you had in place were being followed? And that's the only way of doing that is through a certification and a management system process to make sure that it's happening. Because, and like I said, it has to be written down. And the best thing these days, photographic evidence. If you're doing inspections or permits, you walk around, you take a photo, it's all there. That's your evidence of your due diligence, that you went out, you looked at that scaffold, you found a problem, you fixed it, you got a photo of the before and after. That's the real evidence that they look for to prove that you are doing your job as the owner or the leadership of that business.
That's great. That's a really, really good point. We've talked a lot about how effective it can be having somebody to help you create a system, a custom system. You're definitely a SignOnSite preferred partner, but you don't have unlimited time and resources. So how can people find an effective partner if it isn't Risk and Safety Solutions? What should they be looking for?
It's making sure that you've got a consultant that has a proven history of doing ISO certifications. Like in our business, we've been auditing and doing certifications for 20 years. I'm also federal safety accredited, so working for the Office of the Federal Safety Commissioner in Canberra. So we accredit construction companies at a federal level. So it's looking for someone that's got that sort of experience and the boots on the ground, walking around on site, able to understand your business, but also making sure that you can make your business better and they actually add value to your business.
Yes. Okay. That makes, sorry, I'm actually reading the questions that have been popping up.
I just saw a few pop up.
Got distracted there.
That's all good.
This one says, what happens if I don't use a consultant and I fail my external audit? How costly could it be for my business?
It's just, yeah, it's going to cost you. So each time you get accredited, that accreditation body, whether it's Global Mark or SLA or Global, whoever you've got, they're going to charge you somewhere between, depending on the size of your business, 15 to 30,000 for that accreditation process, just to do the accreditation. So if you fail the first one, then they'll come back again, and then they'll charge you another 5,000 or 10,000 for the second audit. And if you, so it just continues to go on, and that's just going to cost you in consultant fees for the accreditation body, as well as cost you more time that you obviously don't have anyway. So, yeah.
Is it typically a flat rate fee that people pay for an audit, or does it change depending on the size and complexity of your business?
Yeah, you've answered it there. It's the size and complexity of the business that determines how much it costs. Most of the accreditation bodies run a similar sort of model where they look at how many people you've got, how many, you know, the turnover of jobs, how many projects you're operating. Most importantly, how many sites you're operating concurrently. Like you might be a one project at the moment. You might have a $20 million project and that's it, or you might have $21 million projects. So that all gets taken into account. And then obviously whether you're doing one standard, two standards, or three standards obviously comes into account as well. And then they work out a formula based on those key sort of criteria. Yeah.
And what are some of the more common non-conformances that you have seen over the last maybe 2 years?
Basically, people not doing the inspections or the checklists when they're meant to. So typically, most businesses will end up doing a weekly inspection that the site manager does to make sure that the site is safe. Then typically the project manager needs to do a monthly similar type inspection to sort of make sure that he's doing the right thing. That's usually where people fall down. They do it for 1 week and then they don't do it for the next 3 weeks, or the project manager gets too busy and he hasn't done his inspections for the last 2 months or 3 months. That's typically where it falls apart. Similar way where toolbox talks, like consultation communication, is a key part of the standards and the legislation. And where we say we're going to have a monthly toolbox, everyone gets too busy, they get distracted, they don't follow through, and they don't do the toolbox talk each month. They drop it for 3 or 4 months and then try to pick it up again. So typically that's where most people fall apart. And that comes with the training, I guess, that making sure that when you roll out the system, you have to be very, very clear to each person of what they have to do. And we have a pretty simple matrix that we have as part of our system that has each role, this is what you do and this is how often you do it. And this is the form you use to make it follow the bouncing ball, basically.
I like it. So we've talked quite a bit about what we need. We've talked through resources, personnel, time allocation. We haven't talked about tools though. Now, this isn't an ad for SignOnSite at all. There's lots of softwares that you can use that will help with ISO accreditation. Personal favorite of mine is VisiBuild, which is a new quality tool that's on the market for those of you that are looking for a quality management tool. How much of a role do you think technology is playing in making ISO more attainable for people?
I think it's massive. Like, I went down back in the day when I was involved with construction, you would walk onto a commercial construction site, and in the site office, there'd be a bookcase full of folders, and it'd be chock-a-block from probably 20 to 30 folders of paperwork. And now we don't even have that. 90% of the time, I can walk onto a project's site and everything's online. The advantage of having online systems is, like I said before, not only have you got access to your checklists and your permits on your phone or tablet, you can also take photographs. You can upload photographs. With SignOnSite, you've got your whole tracking of inductions, licenses, and that's one of the key things where people do fall over is they bring someone on site, he's operating a forklift or he's operating a piece of mobile plant, an EWP, but we don't have the evidence that that person has got the right competencies to do it. Whereas through online platforms like SignOnSite, it's all there. It's simple. People then, if they've got their own passport and their own profile saved on their phone with all their tickets attached to it and all their licenses, it's an easy system for them. Whatever site they go to, they just upload them to the new site and everything's in place. So much better. And like I said, the photographs is probably one of the best pieces of evidence, and that's from a quality point of view too. So you can show, if you're doing waterproofing, you can show the tank test, you can show the leak tests, you can take the photographs of it, you can take the photograph of the wall before we put the gyprock on to show where the fire penetrations are, where all the pipes are. So down the track, if you need to go back and find anything, it's all documented, beautifully photographed, and it's easy to find.
I love it. We've got 2 minutes left, Chris. What is, do you think, the main piece of advice that you would give to people looking to do that ISO implementation in the next 12 months?
Get the owners of the business on board. Yeah, whoever's running the business and whoever's controlling the resources, the money, then they've got to commit to it. They've got to commit that this is going to require an internal resource as well as an external resource to make it happen fast. If you do it all internally, yes, you can do it, but our experience is it's going to take you 1 to 3 times longer if you try to do it all in-house, because you got to learn everything before you implement it, whereas we can fast track that and get it done faster and quicker.
Fantastic. I've posted Chris's LinkedIn in the chat for you all. We will send out an email as well in the next couple of days with a link to the recording of the webinar and a step-by-step guide on how to go through the first year ISO certification process. But thank you so much, Chris. You can contact Chris on LinkedIn. We will send an email out with his contact details so you can get in touch with him and he can answer any extra questions that you guys have.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thanks, guys. Bye.